Hi everybody, I'm Zoliblitz and welcome to episode 3 in our playthrough of Nevsky's Summer 1240 campaign. Now we've levied our forces, we've built our command decks, it is a time for action. The Teutons will go on the offensive, the Russians will try to defend. This could go any which way. Let's jump into the action. So before we jump into our campaign, let's just do a quick recap. We've levied, all the lords have levied. We have 4 Teutonic lords on the west side of the map. And we have 3 Russian lords on the east side of the map. Quite a good bit of geographic distance between some of them here. Now, a lord is not equal. A lord's strength is largely dependent upon the forces that they have. And what we're going to do next now is we're going to do our first 40-day campaign. This is a 2-turn scenario, 2-campaign scenario, if you would. And in our previous episode, we built up a command deck for the Teutonic Forces, and we built up a command deck for the Russian forces, using kind of that variant method for building up a command deck for solo play that I'm kind of testing out. What we're going to do now in this episode is we're going to pick one card from the top of this deck. Then whichever lord that is gets to act out his command strength. Then we're going to pick a card from here. The Russian lord will act. We go back and forth until all 6 cards on each side have been used up, and that's the end of our first 40-day campaign. We're then going to go to another levy phase, another campaign phase, and that will end the summer of 1240 and end this game. Now this game is based on victory points. The Russian forces get a 1-point victory point edge, so as it stands right now, they're leading 1-0. So with that being said, it's time to jump in and to start our first campaign here. We're going to pick the first card for the Russian lords, and this will be the lord that will act. Now, what I'd like to do a little bit is to talk a little bit about some of the percentages that we've got based on how we modified creating a command deck. So if you recall from our previous episode, we could select 3 cards that were definitely going to be in this deck of 6 cards. And for the Teutonic Forces, they selected 1 Herman, 1 Yaroslav, and then 1 Nud and Abel, who's up here. And Herman here is in the middle, probably the strongest of the lords, and then Yaroslav is right here. Then we positioned Herman number 1 in the deck and Yaroslav number 2 in the deck, and then we mix them up. So there's a 50% chance right now that this is going to be either Herman or Yaroslav. So let us pick and see how that turned out. Yaroslav starts it out. Okay, so let's think for a second here about what we want him and what his possible actions can be. Now before we start moving Yaroslav on the map here, let's just do a quick overview of what his situation looks like. He has 2 command points to his strength, which means that he can essentially do 2 actions during his phase in this campaign. Now he has a bunch of forces, and we haven't really talked about those yet, so let's just do a quick overview. These silver triangular units here are knights. They're mounted knights. They are some of the strongest forces in the game in melee, and they have very good armor, a 1-4 armor rating. And basically, if you roll within that range on a 1-sided die, on a 6-sided die, you negate the hit that's coming in on you. These men-at-arms are fairly strong. They have a defense of 1-3. They can hit moderately hard. And then we have some light horse. Again, we can see the triangular shapes or horse here. Some light horse and some militia. These are relatively weak forces. They don't have very good armor and they don't hit very hard. Yaroslav also has no capabilities attached to him, and he has no archers. So basically he's not that strong, right? So we have to be a little bit careful with him. And our decision now, let's go see what we're going to have him try to do on the map here. So Yaroslav has 2 actions that he could do. Now there's a couple of moves I think we could make with him. We could move him to one of these 2 cities to sit on the border, and he could forge to put himself in a little bit better position to move forward aggressively. But we also know that we pulled out both of his other action cards, so he's only going to get 1 action in this campaign, which makes those rather, I think, tepid moves. They don't have much punch to them. However, when I moved Yaroslav down here to Izborsk in a previous game, then Gavrilo came out and attacked him and actually knocked him out of the war. So I'm a little bit conservative to leave Yaroslav, who's not that strong, down by himself down here, and then Gavrilo activates. That wasn't a bad move, because the Russians get a victory point if they knock a lord out of the game, and it immediately evens up the lord count. So I'm a little bit hesitant to bring him down here, as that feels a little bit overly aggressive. Having said that, if Gavrilo comes down here and knocks out Yaroslav, and then Herman activates in the next turn, Herman can move with boats 1, 2, and immediately lay siege to to Pskov and keep Gavrilo outside. So you can start to get a sense for how like this kind of chess and kind of, if my opponent does this, I do this, which is one of the reasons why I wanted the command decks to have a little bit of variability in them. For the sake of not doing the same thing I did last time, I'm going to play it a little bit conservative with Yaroslav. We're going to move Yaroslav ahead 1, and he's going to come down here to Kirumpa, and that gives him a moved marker for 1 action. Now, when a unit moves, it burns up food, provender, and we have a second action that we can do. In the summer months, one thing that we can do is have him forage, which is going to give him an additional amount of provender. So let's go to add that to his cart, and then because he's moved, he has to consume one of these as well. His forces have to eat. So let's go take a look at that and do that on his mat. So as we saw Yaroslav started with 1 provender, he moved forward 1, and then he foraged, adding a second provender, but because his forces moved, he loses that provender, and that actually leaves him, at least for this end of his portion in the campaign, with 1 provender, which is a little bit better of a defensive position should something bad happen to him. I suspect he's safe on this side of the border. So now let's go. That finishes Yaroslav action. Not the boldest move for the Teutonic Forces here, but now we're going to go to the Russian activation. Now, if we recall, for the Russians, we put Gavrilo as 1 option, and then we put Domash up here as the second option, which means that it's going to be a 50% chance that it's either one of those two. So let's see what we get as the Russians. We get Domash. Now, this is interesting because, so Domash is here, and let's go take a look at his map to see what his forces look like. So as we look at Domash here, we can see probably a medium strength lord. He's got some sergeants, which basically are these mounted forces here. They sit kind of in halfway in between knights, the silver ones here, which are much stronger, and then the just mounted horse, which are not quite as strong as that. So they're kind of a medium range strength troop. These men-at-arms are pretty good ground troops, relatively good armor, 1 to 3, and then this militia is not very strong. So he's got 3 decent troops here and then 2 relatively weak ones. He does, because he's mustered this turn, he has no capabilities either. So he's not super strong, but he's moderately strong. However, interestingly enough, one thing that I realized, the capability card that the Russians drew, their random card here, was this Archbishop Forik, which gives them an extra seat at Novgorod, and for lords that start there, they get command +1. So, interestingly enough, let's take a look at how that impacts Domash's options here in this first campaign action. Domash is here, and we know that Herman, one of the strongest lords, is likely going to come down here and try to take Pskov. That would be a strong move for the Teutonic Forces. So getting Domash to Pskov here would be a great defensive move for the Russians. Now normally, if we look here, Domash has, on his mat, he's got 2 carts and 2 boats, and he's got 4 provender. So he's got too much provender, he'd have to be laden basically to try to make this move. But if we look at how he can get to Pskov, he can follow this waterway down here to the Shilon River for 1 action. From the Shilon River, he can follow this white waterway down to Dubrovno for a 2nd action. Normally, he ends there, but because the Russians have the Archbishop Forik active, he has an extra action, and he has 2 carts. So he could carry his provender down here to Pskov along this roadway here, using his 3rd action and successfully getting to Pskov in 1 turn. That makes taking Pskov by the Teutonic Forces extraordinarily challenging, almost negating Herman's first strong move, which would come directly down here, because Herman's forces are probably stronger than Gavrilo's forces here. So I think that's a good move for the Russians, again, trying to defend and not trying to not lose Pskov here, and trying to kind of put a little blunt the edge of the Teutonic actions. That's what we're going to do. Now, in order for him to do that, let's take a look at his mat here real quick. Domash right now has 4 provender, and basically your carts and your boats, you need carts to travel down the roadways and boats to travel down the waterways there. And you can carry as many provender as you have carts. So for example, he goes down a cartway, he needs 2 carts to carry 2 provender. He's got 4. Now he could move at half speed because it's up to 2 times as much provender as he has transportation. But instead of doing that, we want to get him down there as fast as possible. We're going to have him throw half of his provender away at the start of his move, and then he's going to have enough transportation, whether it's a waterway or a pathway, to be able to carry these 2 provender. He's got 2 carts for each pathway. He's got 2 boats to carry it down the waterway. So he's good, and he can take this with him. So let's get him moving. So here comes Domash. He's going to go down this waterway past the Ilmen River. He's going to tip over, but he's righting himself. Now he's going to come to the Shilon River, Dubrovno, and then his third and final action takes him into Pskov, and he has joined Lord Gavrilo to help defend the city. Now he is moved, which we know means that he's going to have to consume a provender. So we can take this provender, which is at 2, we'll flip it over, and now he's down to 1 provender. And Domash's action is done, but the Russians have bolstered the defense and made it considerably stronger here of Pskov. Alrighty, so now we're back to the Teutonic Forces. They'll have their second action here. And just to kind of give an example of how that command deck system works here, we can kind of determine what the odds are for the Teutonic Forces about which lord is going to come up. We know that both Herman and Yaroslav were the first 2 cards, and because Yaroslav came up in the last hand, we know that there's a 50% chance that that first card is here. So that gives it a 50% chance that it's Herman. However, it also could be one of the 5 cards that we randomly distributed into those 3 spots. And of those, we had 2 Hermans, 1 Newton Abel, and then 2 Rudolphs. So that basically means that the chances for this card for the Teutonic Forces, 70% chance it's Herman, which is kind of what we want. Although this blunts his offensive a little bit. He's not strong enough, I don't think, to take on both of these lords at the same time, which would happen if he tried to come here. So we need to kind of rethink what he could do. But 70% chance it's going to be Herman, 20% chance it's going to be Rudolph down here, or a 10% chance it's going to be Nud and Abel. So we can see how we've dictated what it could be, but there's enough kind of ambiguity and variance that we're not quite sure what's going to happen. So let's flip this over. Oh, Rudolph takes action. Okay, and we know that we put 2 cards for Rudolph in that deck. So at most there's 1 more. So let's think what we can do now with Rudolph. So here's Rudolph's mat, and we can see that as of it is right now, he's got some strong knights, and he's got some pretty good sergeants here, and he's got some good men-at-arms, but he just doesn't have a lot of forces. He does have a command rating of 3. However, we can notice on he's got some really strong forces that he can muster should he get a chance. And we couldn't do that with him in this campaign because he wasn't active. He had to be brought into the campaign in this very first levy. So next turn, next campaign, if he starts the campaign in friendly or home territory, he can muster, and we can potentially add some pretty strong troops to his forces. As it is just right now, he stands pretty good, but we definitely want him to end this campaign on friendly land, so he can muster next time and be a really strong lord in the second campaign. So let's go and take a look and see what that might mean. Rudolph starts here. He's got quite a bit of a hike to get to Russian territory, and he's got 3 command points, and he's only got carts. So if he were to come down a waterway, he would have to toss his provender, couldn't bring it with him, which would leave him potentially hungry and make him take another action. So it creates complications. So for simplicity's sake, I think we want him to use a cartway here, a pathway, which means that he could come 1, 2, then potentially 3 into Russian territory, but he really can't do anything once he's gotten there. I mean, he would lay siege to Izborsk, which would be helpful, but it's not really going to get us anywhere. And if he doesn't have another card in the command deck, that means he's going to end his campaign on the Russian side of the map, which means he can't levy in the next campaign. So I think what we're going to do for Rudolph is similar to what we did to Yaroslav, which is kind of set the stage for future action. And if he does activate again, we can bring him over the border and have him raid and then bring him back as well. So it's not a total loss if we have him sit here now and he does activate again. So he's going to move 1. Second action gets him here to Latgalia. Then his third action is going to be similar to what Yaroslav did. He's going to forage for provender, and then he's actually going to use that provender that he just brought in to eat and defeat his troops, which leaves him with the original one provender that he has. So the Teutonic forces here, starting off relatively conservatively, they haven't ventured into Russian terrain yet. However, we do know that Hermann is potentially going to have quite a few actions, because it was unlikely that Rudolf was the second lord to activate. So now let's go to the Russians' second lord activation. Now we're going to pick our second card. Let's take a look at what the odds are here so we can kind of, again, get a sense for how that card deck building system works. And a couple of quick things as we get to this too. I had Vladislav up here in Ladoga, which is his seat, but he actually starts this campaign in Neva, a trade route here, so I've corrected that before it impacted gameplay. So the command deck here, we know that Domash was picked first. We also know Gavrilo was, I think, the very first card we had in the deck. So it's a 50% chance that it's Gavrilo. And then of the 5 remaining cards, we know that we had 1 Domash, 3 Vladislav, and 1 Gavrilo. So it's a 60% chance that Gavrilo is coming up, 10% chance it's Domash, and a 30% chance that it's Vladislav. So let's see how the odds play out here. It's Vladislav, which is actually fairly good, because I'm not sure that as the Russians, we want to do too much with them. And, well, yeah, I mean, I suppose we could think of something, but, you know, we kind of want to see what Hermann's going to do before we kind of start moving around here with these guys. So Vladislav moving is actually, I think, fairly good for the Russians. The question is, what shall we have him do? So here's Vladislav's mat, and like many of the other Russian lords, he's kind of medium strength, tending towards a little bit towards the stronger. He's got the crossbowmen, which means that these men in arms have a little bit of an extra punch. He's got a unit of knights, but he's got 1 unit of light horses, 4 units. He's not as strong as Knud and Abel, which is the problem the Danish princes that are going to probably come across by ship. And let's take a look and see what the map dictates for that. So that, because I think that kind of tells us a little bit what might be a good play for Vladislav. So Vladislav sits up here in Neva, and behind him is the city of Ladoga, which is a 3-point, rather strong and powerful city. Now, the problem that Vladislav faces is that he's probably going to lose in a head-to-head battle if he's against Knud and Abel. He could maybe able to defend successfully against him, especially if he's holed up in some kind of a siege situation. But Knud and Abel have 3 options when they come across if there's no lord there. They could come to Luga, Koporia, or Neva, but because Vladislav is here, they can't come to Neva. So if, as part of Vladislav's actions, we vacate Neva and start moving towards the Teutonic border here to threaten, like Narwia here, then as soon as Knud and Abel activates, he can come here to Neva, and then on the successive turn, threaten Ladoga. So I'm a little bit hesitant at this point in time for Vladislav to leave Neva until we see what Knud and Abel do. Because if they come here, then Vladislav can safely start to kind of move in, perhaps taking one of these 2 cities to hole up here. It depends on kind of what they do. So I think for the moment, that means that it's probably better to be a little bit passive with Vladislav. Now again, a couple of things. I haven't played that much, so these may be kind of, I wouldn't trust my thinking in any way, sense, shape, manner, or the form as good strategy. So take this all with a grain of salt. I'm figuring the game out, I'm kind of making stuff up as I go along, I'm kind of thinking out loud, but this is some of the thoughts that I have right now. So I think what we're going to have Vladislav do, he can forage for food, and we're going to have him forage. He's got 3 actions. He potentially could add 3 provender like that, but we're going to have him forage just twice and add 2 provender, just because I wonder if perhaps he's going to have to flee from Knud and Abel, in which case he may need to chuck all that Now, actually, we're going to have him forage 3 times. So he's going to forage 3 times, add 3 provender. So he's got a ton of food now. He's got a total of 4 provender, so he can feed everybody. And because he didn't move, he doesn't activate, and they don't have to feed his troops. So Vladislav forages, adding a ton of provender, and is waiting to see what Knud and Abel are going to do. Let's go now to the Teutonic Forces in the 3rd activation. So let's figure out the odds here, what cards are going to come up. This is our 4th card. We know that this was one of the randomly selected cards. However, Hermann has not yet come up. So we know it's a 50% chance that it's Hermann. Hermann was also 2 of the other 4 cards that are left. So that adds another 25%. So it's a 75% chance it is Hermann. and we know it's a 12.5% chance that it's either Rudolf or Nud and Abel. So let's flip this over. So again, probably Hermann. I mean, the odds are that it's going to be Hermann here. It's Nud and Abel. So the Russians, the Teutonic forces here, Nud and Abel will be kind of very conservative here. The luck turning on relatively rare odds. But that does make it interesting now, because that's exactly what Vladislav was hoping to get, is to make Nud and Abel commit to see what happens. So let's go up and take a look at Nud and Abel, and then we're going to have them move and do some action here. Finally, I think we're going to get a lord going over into the opposing nation's side. All right, so here we have Nud and Abel, not relatively strong, right? He's got some knights here, he's got some sergeants, that mid-range mounted unit, and he's got 3 men-at-arms, they've got crossbows, and they have cogs. And the reason why these cogs are helpful is because ships are needed for carrying provender, but they're also needed for carrying horses. He has 2 units of horses, and he has 2 provender, so that's really 4 points worth of cargo, if you would, that he has to get on the ships. He has 2 ships, but because they have cogs, they count as 2, so he has no problem carrying his provender and his horse units with him. So we can move both of them there, and he's relatively powerful. So I think it's time now for the Teutonic forces to say, let's go on the offensive and let's start to do some damage. So here we are. Nud and Abel is over here at Reval. They can use the entire command points. He has 2 command points, but he could use all of them to sail to a seaport that doesn't have an unbesieged enemy lord. So Luga, we could go here too, but Luga is going to be more kind of aggressive and probably more profitable in Kaporia. If we go to Luga, this is worth 1 victory point because it's a square region, it's a trade route. So as soon as they land there, the Russian forces would get, the Teutonic forces would get 1 victory point, and it threatens Khaibolovo down here. However, if Vladislav were to move into act, Vladislav could come down here and hole up here, thereby blocking Nud and Abel here, because they would have to come through there and take that by a siege or take it direct combat there. So this is kind of a risky transport, and we know that Vladislav he could be all done for the Russians, but he could also have 2 more actions in that deck. So we don't quite know, because of the way we build the command decks, we don't know as the Teutonic forces what Vladislav might or might not do. He may be inactive for the rest of the campaign. Nud and Abel may be active 1 more time and could push up here. So a lot of different ways this could go. So the question for Nud and Abel is, do we want to come here for the certainty of the 1 point, or do we want to come here, lay siege to Kaporia, and then try to take it if he activates again? I feel like that might be the stronger move here, because I hesitate to have them... It might be tough for Nud and Abel, the Danish princes, to take Khaibolovo if Vladislav is able to come down here. Now how many active... He has 3 command points too, so he could go 1, 2, 3. He can reach it if he activates again. So I think let's go to Kaporia and let's just try it and see what happens. So Nud and Abel are going to get on their ships, they're going to sail through the Baltic Sea, and they're going to come right here to Kaporia. This uses up all their command points and it ends their turn. Now, the interesting thing here is this immediately begins a siege of Kaporia, because it's a stronghold. It's got 1 defense point, so it's not strong. I think if they assault it, I think they're going to be able to take it in 1 turn. Have a very good chance to, anyway. So that it's creating a problem for the Russians right away. Vladislav, how they might react would be uncertain. I think this is a good move for the Teutonic forces, so I'm pretty happy about that one. Let's go now to the Russian activation and see how they respond. All right, so using our command deck kind of odds here, we have, I think it's calculated as a 62.5% chance that it's Gavrilo, 12.5% chance it's Domash, and a 25% chance that this is Vladislav again. So again, we can kind of see how this, it creates a lot of variability. One of the things I like with this command deck is, sometimes you get things like it's not ideal, like the Teutonic forces haven't activated Hermann yet, right? So that would be good. But I like the loss of that kind of determination, which actually was rare. Odds are very high that Hermann would have activated any time we played this game by now, by the way that we built up the deck. He's fallen now to the 4th card in line, because we had him picked first for the Teutonic forces, so that's really unlikely. But Gavrilo was also the 1st card, so let's see what we get here now for the Russian forces. There it is. So they hit on the odds, 62.5% chance. It is Gavrilo who activates. Let's think about a little bit what he can do. So here's Gavrilo's mat with force, and we can see he's got a little bit of punch here. He's got the capability, the Luzhniki capability, which gives these militia forces and horse troops archery, so they're going to get some shots off really quick in a battle. They aren't strong defensively. They only have an armor of 1, so they do crumble pretty quick. He does, however, have a contingent of knights and a contingent of men-at-arms. So, I mean, he's got some punch, but he's weak defensively. So probably, at this point, at least one of the stronger lords, but still kind of in that medium range. I think he could probably beat Yaroslav in face-to-face combat, because Yaroslav doesn't have archers. He would probably maybe 50-50 against Herman. Against Rudolf, and then maybe he's going to lose against Herman, I think, for certain, especially on the offensive, because the defenders go first. There are a lot of options here for Gavrilo, and I'm not quite sure what the best one to take is. One is to leave him here, safely kind of at Pskov here, in a very strong defensive position with Domash, especially because we know that Herman's probably going to be really active in the back half of the campaign here. So that's one thought. The other thought would be he could come over here and actually attack Yaroslav here and probably beat him, but he would be left without provender in enemy territory, unlikely perhaps to be able to muster in the next one. Very exposed when Herman attacks to come down here and at least drive him back and have him run out of food and things. I mean, I suppose Gavrilo actually has coin, so he could potentially escape here. And his service is quite long, so I mean, do we risk it? Do we have him move? Come over here and try to take on Yaroslav and really kind of unusually for the Russians go on the offensive? He's going to get hit, but and potentially, well, I guess Yaroslav would probably vacate. He would probably leave rather than fight, because I wouldn't fight Gavrilo in the open field if I were Yaroslav. I think that would be probably going to lose, but he could. Oh my goodness, there's so much possibility here. Let's think for a second. Let's live boldly. I don't think I would try this as a human player in a 2-player game, but I want to also see some combat in this episode. So for the sake of let's banging heads together kind of thing, let's just try this and see what happens. Gavrilo is going to go on the offensive. The Teutonic Forces should be on the offensive. Gavrilo is going to make a bold and daring venture across the border. Now he has 2 provender, he has 1 boat and 1 cart. So he could travel laden, but he wouldn't have enough because he's only got 2 command points. So he's going to have to chuck one of his provender here, which is not ideal either, because he's going into enemy territory and he doesn't have any food, right? So this doesn't sound like a good idea as I mentioned this, but we're going to do it anyway. So Gavrilo's going to go, he's going to throw away his extra provender so he can move at full speed. He's going to go 1 down here to Izborsk, and then he's going to go 2 right across here to Kurumpath. And he's going to meet face-to-face with Yaroslav. Now, Yaroslav has a number of options here. Now, he's also moved, right? We know Gavrilo has moved. Now, combat is a result of movement. It's not a separate action. So because they're in the same place here, Yaroslav has to respond to Gavrilo's threat. Okay, I've been thinking about this for a long time. I think the smartest move is for Yaroslav to retreat to Obenpad, to his seat here. But for the sake of seeing a battle in this episode, and for the sake of just trying this, I'm curious to see if Gavrilo with his archers can, by being on the offensive, Yaroslav's on the defensive, so he has a little bit of an edge to when they fire, but Gavrilo has archers and has a little bit stronger force. Let's just see how this battle works out, because I think it's a mistake for Yaroslav, honestly, to stay and fight. I think he's going to lose, and I think he's going to lose. He's going to get knocked out of the game and give the Russians a victory point. But let's just try it, because even if he does lose, he could weaken Gavrilo, and if Herman's going to activate, that makes his move obvious, which is to come down and to pound on Gavrilo after Yaroslav has weakened him. So let's just say that Yaroslav, the exile of Pskov, is like he's so infuriated that Gavrilo has his seat that rather than be rational, Yaroslav's going to say, "Bring it, Gavrilo, let's go to battle." So let's set up this battle and fight it out. So there's a bunch of ways to set these up, but for the sake of we only have 2 lords, and they're going to meet head-to-head, we're just going to, Gavrilo, Yaroslav, meeting head-to-head in the battle, and we're going to walk through it this way, so it's relatively straightforward. Now, we could have Yaroslav try to concede the field right now, but we're going to play the odds and see. Yaroslav's going to fight to the death. We're going to just see if he can beat Gavrilo, even though I think Gavrilo has, Yaroslav's going to need some lucky fighting here in order to win. So let's walk through the command sequence. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, not so much of a tutorial, because this in itself could take quite a while. Instead, I'm going to kind of kind of work through it, because there's a lot of other tutorials out there that can do this, but you'll get a sense for how it works too. So meeting in open battle, the first thing that we're going to see, there's no events that come to play right now. Neither side has events they can bring to bear. They would be holding in their deck. So we go now to, is anyone going to concede? And we've already decided Yaroslav is not going to concede. So now we go to our the strike phase, and we look first to anybody that has archers, and we look first to the defending archers. Yaroslav has no archers. He has militia, horse, men-at-arms, and his knights. Gavrilo, however, has this Luchniki capability, which says the militia and the light horse have archery. So now we're going to calculate what the strike strength is of these. Each one of these is a half. So he has a half and a half. He has 2 powers of attack. So he's going to get 2 rolls that he gets 2 hits essentially automatically on Yaroslav. And Yaroslav, we have to decide where we're going to see if Yaroslav can negate those hits. Now, how this works is Yaroslav can determine which ones are getting the hits first. We're going to take a little bit of a risk here, because these have a defense of 1. These are defense of, no, actually, let's do this. Let's go first at the men-at-arms. That's a 1 to 3. So Gavrilo rolls once. He needs a 1 to 3 on this first hit for Yaroslav to be able to negate it and have his men-at-arms not get routed. A 6. That's not a good start for Yaroslav. So Gavrilo's archers rip through Yaroslav's men-at-arms, driving them from the battlefield. Now Yaroslav has to decide what he's going to do with the second strike. He's going to take a chance. He's going to have it go at his knights here. Now they need a 1 to 4. This would be pretty much game over if Yaroslav loses his knights in this first round like this. A 1. So they withstand the strike. That's helpful. Now we go to the melee phase. And the first thing we're going to start with is the defending horse. Yaroslav is defending, so we look at his horse units. These have a strike capability of 2. These have a strike capability of half. So we round up. So 3 strikes come into Gavrilo's forces here. Now Gavrilo has to decide where they're going to go. I want to strike with the melee and the militia, but the militia have fired. Let's have it go actually at the men-at-arms first and see if Gavrilo can get lucky. So here's the first strike. A 2, it withstands it. So the men-at-arms are going to stand again against the horses of Yaroslav. A 6, they falter and rout. So Gavrilo's men-at-arms falter. Now he has to decide what to do with the next hit. Let's take it on, he could risk the knights here, but this is a 2-strike force. I'd hate to lose them. Let's put the militia forward. So he sends the measly militia with their armor rating of 1 forward. Chances are they're going to get routed, and they do badly, a 6. So not a bad attack for Yaroslav's mounted forces here. They drive 2 units from the field of Gavrilo's field, and it's relatively even up right now. I mean, Gavrilo has the archery, so that second round could make a difference here. But now we go to Gavrilo's mounted forces, which, like Yaroslav, have actually 3 strikes, because they've been relatively undamaged here by the battle so far. So Gavrilo has 3 strikes coming in on Yaroslav. This could be where we see the battle turn. Yaroslav is going to try to take it on his knights and hope they can roll 1 to 4 3 times in a row to have the knights make a heroic stand. The knights rush to counter the rush of Gavrilo's knights. They get a 5 and they falter right away. This is pretty much it for Yaroslav. He is going to be soundly defeated now. He's lost his best unit. What does he do now? We want to keep the militia because the ground troops are next instead of the mounted. So the mounted troops, the horses, go to the front. They have a defense of 1 and the strike is a 4. So Yaroslav's horses are routed. Oh, this is it. Now he's got to use his militia there, but they rout as well. Gavrilo's knights and light horse rip through Yaroslav's forces and have completely turned the battle. Now we go to the defensive phase for the foot soldiers. All that Yaroslav has left is this militia right here. The question is, what does Gavrilo do? What do we want to have them come up to try to defend? Let's send the knights, because he could get them back later too. So we're going to have him send his knights forward. They need a 1 to 4 to defend. They get a 4 and they hold. This is bad for Yaroslav. Now Gavrilo's foot soldiers, the measly militia, it's militia on militia combat. It's a half potential strike, so it goes up to 1. Yaroslav needs a 1 to defend himself. A 5. He's completely been routed. Yeah, this was a dumb idea, wasn't it? Yaroslav holding the field. Yeah, Gavrilo just rolled over him. I mean, they had better rolls, but then those knights ripped through them. But okay. So in one round, Gavrilo's forces have decimated Yaroslav's forces, routing the entire contingent. Now it's time for us to clean up after this battle. Let's see how this works. So Yaroslav's routed forces have to retreat. He could go back to Odsel here, he could go to Odenpah. He's kind of doomed here, as we'll see, though. He's going to go to Odenpah, and he's also moved and fought. But now we have to see which troops, and he has to leave behind all his provender. So that means, let's take a look at that. So Yaroslav can't take anything with him. So that means his provender goes and his cart goes as spoils to Gavrilo. So that's helpful for Gavrilo for sure, and bad for Yaroslav. So now we have to see which forces survive and which forces are lost for good. And we do that by, for Gavrilo, he won, and so if you roll their armor rating they come back into service. If you fail that, they are removed from the game. So let's do the men-at-arms first. We need a 1 to 3 for them to stay in the game. They do. They roll a 1, so they recover their senses and come back into the force. Likewise, let's roll now for the militia. They need a 1. They get a 6. So he does lose these militia forces, which will weaken him slightly. Now, Yaroslav, because they lost the battle and were routed, you don't use the armor rating. It's just a 1 for all of these forces. So we'll go left to right and roll them in turn. It's a 6. We'll roll another 4. And then a 2, so all 3 of these are lost. Now let's do the militia. So we can see this is a catastrophic loss for Yaroslav. The exile of Pskov is going to forever. I'll just roll them both at once. 3 and a 2. He has no forces left. So when there is a lord with no forces left in the game, it was going to happen anyway because of the circumstances of his service and all that kind of stuff, and what had happened with his food and everything, but Yaroslav's been eliminated from the game. He's been completely wiped out. His forces are decimated. He fled to his seat, but all his troops are gone. Gavrilo has won the day. So let's go back to the map. We're going to remove Yaroslav from the game, and we're going to sort out what happens with this. Big day for the Russian forces. We don't need this. We don't need this. Yaroslav is gone. Now, we do have here the fact that Gavrilo moved and fought, so we're going to take one of those provender, the 3 that he has, and reduce it down to 2. I'll do that off camera. And also, we have one last thing to do here. We'll remove this moved and fought. This is now, that sits there. Nothing has happened to that. That's not a victory point location. So right now we can see the score is the Russian forces 1 and the Teutonic Forces 0. In this scenario, there's a special victory point condition that you get a victory point if you eliminate or the enemy lord is forced to disband. So the Russians pick up a victory point there for their win. Yaroslav is eliminated from the game, and the Russians are winning 2-0. And with that, we've finished up the Russian command phase. We are halfway through the campaign. This is going to be a good spot for us to stop. So far, though, the Teutonic invasion, they've made some progress up here in the north with the Danish princes, right? Because they could conceivably take Kaporya and pick up a victory point. I don't know if Vladislav is going to be able to stop that. Down in the south, however, a different picture. Gavrilo's bold move wipes out Yaroslav's forces, leaving a Russian lord in Teutonic lands, but this very strong Hermann to the north has yet to activate, and probably will be activating in next turn. It's a 75% chance that this is Hermann, 12.5% chance that it's Dunabel, and a 12.5% chance that it is Rudolf. What we're going to do now is we're going to pick that card and then end it here and then decide what's going on. So it's got to be Hermann now, right? It's not. So that very first Hermann card that we picked has drifted all the way to the back of the deck. I mean, wow, that's so unfortunate for them. But that does make it interesting here, because I think what we're going to do when we come back to this in the next episode, we're going to have Newton Abel storm Kaporya. They're going to try to take it. The Teutonic forces need to get some victory points. Kaporya is weak. Newton Abel's strong. They got crossbows. Kaporya doesn't have any lord there. It's time for the Teutonic Forces to extract some revenge for the death or the routing of Yaroslav. So when we come back, we'll pick up the action there, and we'll do the back half of this campaign with Newton Abel starting out. I'm excited to see what happens here at Kaporia. One last thought I have too. I'm still very much learning the game, so it's very possible you may see some mistakes in here. And strategy-wise, you know, I think I still have a lot to learn to play this game well. I think I'm in the process of learning to play rather than playing well, if that makes any sense. So feedback, comments, thoughts, if you see any mistakes, let me know down there and I'll make a note of them. I'm not intending this so much as a tutorial with exactly getting the play right. I don't think I'm quite at that level. More show just to show kind of how fun the game is, show some of the thinking behind the game, and then also take a look at that card deck creation system to see how it impacts play. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that too. This has obviously been incredibly unlikely that we would see Herman not be picked in one of the first 4 cards. I mean, it's about a 10% chance that this would happen normally, plus one of these other cards could have been him. A 75% chance right here. But that's, I think, kind of that magic behind the system, is that it makes things, you don't quite know what's going to happen, and it plays out in some really unique ways. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll be back in a few days with the back half of our first summer campaign. Take care, everybody.